When I came to Lincoln, I remember Sam Anderson and Paul Moore. My freshman year, they were graduating in '66, and this was the Watts riot had just erupted, and they had these papers they showed me, and they were trying to, at that time, make students aware of the Black movement. I would say they were into the Black movement. That was part of their mindset. And just a side note, in 1964, like I said, I was involved in Student Congress of Racial Equality. I actually attended the 1964 Democratic Convention protesting for the Mississippi Freedom. And I met Fannie Lou Hamer. James Farmer was there. And it's what's interesting, this is before Black Lives Matter, all the big protests. There was a lot of white people. We were protesting the Fannie Lou Hamer to seat the Mississippi Freedom Democratic Party. Democratic 1964, yep, I was there. Like I said, when you grow up in America like a young Black man, and you just observe in the community, you go to the South, and you see the status of where Black people are. As James Baldwin said, to be conscious and Black is to be in a constant state of rage. Mm-hmm. Well, many of us were in a constant state of rage because we observed the unfairness. So this was an opportunity when you got to college to write down your thoughts. It was cathartic in some ways, because these are things going inside your mind all the time. I wanted the students to read what I had to say, first of all. But I also wanted to, basically uplift the Black community. I mean, look at the articles I wrote. Hell No, We Won't Go. That was about Vietnam. And I was trying to tell all my brothers who at Lincoln, don't be a conscious objector, refuse to go to the war. This was my way of being what you would call an activist. Certain things that people would talk about, but it was rhetoric, it was more rhetoric as opposed to really talking about really changing the society. In some parts of the Black movement, it was faddish. That's the part I saw. Like the Afro, the society commercialized it. If you wanted to fit in, you had to be Black, but not. In other words, you could appear Black, but you were not. When I say, but you were not really revolutionary. Just as a sidebar, Lincoln was that's where the book Black Power was written here. But Black Power, I would say the main thing was at Lincoln. When I say it, I can say that without any equivocation. The main thrust or ideas, I must be bold and say, came from Lincoln University, because Stokely Carmichael used to come on campus, so they wrote the book on this campus. And if you read his book is still relevant to this day. Black Power. Lincoln, a lot of us went to A lot of us went to graduate school. Now remember, Martin Luther King had died in 1968. I was here. That changed the whole society. His death, not just his death, but the riots and all of that, changed the whole country. I wish that students would read people like James Baldwin, Du Bois. They need to study the Lincolnian. They need to read Martin Luther King, you know.
I was in an English journalism program while I was here at Lincoln. So class of '88. Back then we had a partnership with Temple University. So in the English department, I had to go to Temple for a year and take journalism courses. And that, because when I came here, I didn't know exactly what I wanted to study. I was thinking about business. But I took a journalism course with Dr. Joanne Gavin, which she and her husband Alexander Gavin, were legends here. Professors. So I'm taking this journalism course. It seemed like something good to do. And Joanne Gavin is fine. So you got to look at the context of me and my 19-year-old self, and I'm looking at her, and I must have been sitting in the class like this, and in a couple of weeks she must have just got tired, looked at me and said, look, I'm going to make you the editor of the Lincolnian, because the class was the class that put together the paper. And so everybody with each edition was going to be a guest editor. So when she said that, I was like, well, whatever you say. What happens as we're preparing for the edition, one of the things that I had to do as editor was to write a guest opinion column. And one of the things I saw was going on campus was we were doing something called slave auctions, like a cross between a fashion show and an auction where people sashay down the runway, you bid it on them, and guys would bid on their girlfriends, girls, and guy friends, or somebody that you liked, so that they come to your room for a week and they gotta, clean your room or whatever. It's entertaining. So it was a fundraiser. It wasn't intent of, not anybody standing up there in chains and shackles. But it started to dawn on me that, for an HBCU, and especially one of our importance, right? HBCU that was founded during slavery, making a statement that black folk had the intellectual capacity and ability to achieve at the level of whites, that we would do a slave auction like that. And, I ended up writing an editorial, writing a guest column about it. And it caused a stir on campus. Initially, people thought a professor wrote it, and then we found out one of their own wrote it. And again, I'm a first-year student, so I'm not that widely known. And eventually, they ended. So for me, somebody born up in Brooklyn, New York, and Brownsville, one of the roughest areas where you settle conflicts with violence oftentimes, it taught me that the pen is mightier than the sword, and that it was real. And I was hooked on journalism ever since after that. Yeah, that's how I got exposed to Lincolnian. Became an editor, and it led to a 20-plus year career in journalism. No basketball. Well, you develop the stories of the issue, worked with writers, assigned stories, did some editing. We had a designer that was focused on the layout, but mainly story development and editing articles and making sure the paper got out on time. It's like on campus, like the food, we didn't have outstanding food like the students have now. So it was issues like that, issues like trying to get black studies mandatory on the campus. That was a long-standing issue with Lincoln, going back to Langston Hughes' days of you'll see the archives. stories of the time, like apartheid, issues of what was happening in South Africa. I remember writing something about that. I had something I looked at the other day where I was comparing, South Africa to the United States and how the countries developed. And I was thinking about, man, I said, man, I forgot I wrote that. In a lot of colleges, the newspaper staff is like a separate entity from the college organization piece, or separate from the journalism department. In our case, like I said, it was a class that was in journalism, so it fell under English. So you had people in that class were those who were really, trying to develop in their majors as English majors, and also serious about journalism. But you also had some people from other majors that were there. So the dynamic is, if you were understaffed, that was really something you wanted to do. And so absolutely, I know when I wrote a piece talking about making Black studies mandatory. Anytime you're bucking against the system or bucking against what others in power want to see happen, it's going to be risky. But that's the space in which we operate as journalists. So you can't sugarcoat it. And what you have at your defense is getting your facts and the context. I can't stress more than anything the context, because like right now in this era that we're in, everybody's walking around with a phone, and you can see a disturbance going on, and you recorded it, and just because you recorded it and it actually did happen does not mean that that's the whole story. You got to have the context, what happened before, what's going on now, and what is the space in which all of this is going on. The important is that we operate, by nature of being a journalist, you operate in a space of conflict and riskiness. That's the whole history of Black journalism, certainly in this country. So when you sign up for that, you got to understand that's what you're signing, that's the tradition in which you're entering. So get your facts right. Be like, Ida B. Wells, writing about lynching. You know how risky that was? But our ancestor, that sister got her facts right. Don't just write from your emotion. Also, African American literary form of writing. And my dissertation became how to apply that form to health communications to African Americans. So that moment, and when I wrote that, I didn't know I was writing in that form. I learned later I was exposed in writing in that form because the class was teaching us about Freedom's Journal, the first Black newspaper. And that was a Jeremiah form in which they were writing. So when I wrote my I sort of duplicated that rhythm and that flow. Until this day, I still write that way. Don't say, oh, we don't do paper anymore. There's something to be said about the tangible feel of a newspaper.